Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about a little bit of a pattern that I've noticed in several tournaments over the past few years, and I wanted to share it with you guys to see if you guys also picked up on it. And this is the notorious Goths pick that keeps coming up in pro tournaments in Age of Empires 2. But what's interesting about this Goths pick is that it's not being picked as a first or second tier civ in the draft. It is usually picked at the end of the draft as kind of a cheesy secret last pick, and there are plenty of reasons for that, and I'm going to be diving into why pro players are opting for this secret Goths last pick. And it's not just one player in particular that does this. I've seen countless players do it, maybe 5 to 10 players do it over the past few years, and the most notable are Doubts, Tato, MBL, and Vinchester. Now, for those who might not be too familiar with the meta in Age of Empires, infantry civilizations in general are just simply not the strongest. There are many reasons for this, but to keep it short and simple, infantry as a general rule is suffering from two defects of what makes a unit good. So in general, a unit that's highly mobile is really good because you get to use that mobility, run from one area of the map to the other, run back when you're weak, that kind of stuff. And infantry are slow, so they suffer from the lack of mobility. And the other thing is that they are a melee unit, so they have to go up close to attack their opponents, and they suffer from lack of range. So no range and no mobility leaves them a little bit vulnerable in most cases that you're going to find in pro play. And infantry civilizations in general have a lot of their bonuses geared towards the infantry line one way or another, and those bonuses that are going towards infantry are not going towards more practical units like the scout line or the knight line and castle age and the archer line, which are probably the most popular army lines or generic army lines in tournament play. And so as a result, infantry civilizations will basically be playing with less bonuses in most scenarios compared to the other top tier meta civilizations like Portuguese, like Mayans, like Khmer, etc. However, with the case of the Goths, it doesn't exactly break this rule. Like, Goths are definitely a hand and heart infantry civilization, start to finish. This is exactly what they want to play, which is infantry, and they have a few other bonuses that help them out, and their tech tree is wide enough to the point that they do have a couple options that are reasonable in the late game. So the Goths are exactly that, an infantry civ. They are not breaking this rule and thus being picked. They are being picked for a variety of other reasons. First of all, they are the one infantry civ that allows infantry to be viable from very early in the game, which is where you'd want infantry to be played in the first place. And so Goths really enable the few infantry strategies that we have in the early Dark Age and Feudal Age. And so if there was ever a case for infantry to be viable, the Goths would be your go-to civ. The Goths also have a couple other things going for them in the early game. Their hunt lasting longer lets them get a really good start on certain maps, and the fact that they can research loom instantly lets them go for all kinds of cheesy lames in the early game by sending a vill forward, getting loom right away, which is going to cost you just the 50 gold and no town center time, so you're not going to be a vill behind by picking up loom, and you get to go ahead and run towards your opponent's base with that villager, attack his villagers, force him to get loom, maybe kill one of his boars, which you do kill faster, and do all kinds of other things like walling in their berries, walling in their wood line, maybe building a sneaky barracks forward. All of those things you can accomplish within the first few minutes of a Goth start by just simply sending a villager with loom forward. So here's what's happening in tournaments. The Goths are simply never being picked in the first 1 or 2 rotations in the draft. They are obviously not a meta civilization. They are obviously not one of the best and most consistent civilizations. However, near the end of the draft, you usually have 1 or 2 picks that are more or less just extra picks. For example, in a best of 7, you'd get 8 civilizations in your draft, meaning that one of their civilizations will not be played. So in that last pick slot or last 2 picks, it's very often the case where you just don't need an extra civilization. You have the ones you want to play. However, your opponent doesn't know what you want to play, so you have that one extra slot where you can kind of go for some mind games. And because the Goths have so much cheese potential and so many little things that could get them an advantage in the early game if things go right, last picking the Goths can be a really good rogue strategy to confuse your opponent and throw him off guard. Also, he's always going to be thinking, when is he going to be using the Goths? What do I have to be worried about? Has he practiced something? And you win the mental game in the entire draft by simply allocating your last pick to the Goths. If you pick some other civilization that is more standard like the Slavs, your opponent might consider that you'd play Slavs somewhere, but it's not exactly a scary threat that could come in as a last pick and kill some of the top tier first picks that you'll see. Slavs simply don't have anything unconventional about them enough to where they can pull an advantage out of nowhere and gain some nice momentum against a higher tier civ. And of course, Slavs is just an example. example, I could have thrown a handful of civs in there. So it's very clear that pro players love this aspect of Goths. The fact that the civ can gain an advantage versus any top tier civ through this early game cheese and potentially win the game if things go your way and you get a little lucky makes them a nice pick for your last civilization, because you get to throw off your opponent and you get to potentially cheese one win using your last pick. Seems like a great rogue strategy to implement, but it's actually better than just this. The Goths are actually really good on many maps, not just land maps that you'd expect them to be played, but they're also great at hybrid maps for a very sneaky reason. If you can get a militia rush right away on a hybrid map, which we've seen, for example, in Hidden Cup on the map Evacuation, if you can get a militia rush going in the Dark Age instead of going for your dock, you can then shift the balance of the game completely. Your opponent will go for the standard approach of making a dock and adding fishing ships, and you as a Goth player will have a forward villager with Loom, as I talked about earlier, and you can also get some militia out in the field really early because you don't spend the wood on a dock and instead spend the wood on a barracks. These militia are usually not as good as the fishing ships. However, with a little bit of luck and with the forward villager that could cause some chaos, you can actually gain some nice advantage and catch your opponent off guard. If, for example, you've practiced this militia opening 10 times secretly behind closed doors, nobody's seen it, and your opponent has never seen the strategy in his life, he is going to be completely off theory. The plan he had to just add some fishing ships in Dark Age, go up to Feudal Age and play a standard game with a little bit of army and just develop from there is completely out the window. He has to react to now the militia aggression, he has to react to the fact that you have a Vil forward, and he's got to think on the fly and make all of these precise, well-timed decisions to deal with the pressure you're putting. And if he slips up at any point or fails in any of these defensive options, then you're going to gain an advantage as the Goths player. Yes, you're going to be behind with a couple fishing ships, but if you gain significant momentum on land, militia then turning into men at arm can be a very deadly and snowbally push from the Goths. So now, as you can see, the Goths are a cheesy civ on a lot of land maps, but they're also quite cheesy on hybrid maps because of this imbalance caused by going for a barracks over a dock. So now the Goths' last pick turns into a big threat on a variety of maps, making it hard to predict where the Goths will be played and hard to plan accordingly. There are a couple more benefits to a Goths' last pick, however. There are a couple civilizations that really struggle against the Goths, and these civilizations happen to be top tier meta picks. For example, the Mayans. Mayans are simply one of the best civilizations on any land map in the game, or any open to semi-open land map in the game. The Goths are a great counter to the Mayans in a lot of cases. Now, head to head on Arabia, the Goths often lose against Mayans because the Mayans have a much better economy and much better play for the first 15 to 25 minutes. So even if you get the nice Goths counterpick, the Mayans can still win. However, if you factor in the early cheesing, the Goths can easily make the game messy enough to where they can scale to late game, and the Goths in late game absolutely dominate the Mayans. There's not a single unit in the Mayan arsenal that can deal with the husk roll consistently and effectively, and if you let the Goths get the late game 30-35 minutes plus and they're spamming the husk roll, the Mayan player will have no answer whatsoever, and so this is why this matchup is so scary. So your opponent picking Mayans first in the draft only to lose to a Goths last pick is such a dangerous thought, and it's one other reason why the Goths are so popular as this rogue pick at the end of the draft. And lastly, when it comes to the Goths, because it's not a pick that's prioritized in the first or second rotation of the draft, you can basically prepare any strategy you want in private, make it as risky as you want, as degenerate as you want, and you know for a fact that you're gonna get Goths at the end of your draft because other players are most often not prioritizing them. And so it's a consistent pick that you can pick up whenever you want. You know you have it in your back pocket, and you know exactly what you've prepared while your opponent has no idea, putting the mental stress on them before the series even begins. Now, with all that said, the Goths in tournaments have not been the craziest of success stories. It's had mixed success, to be completely honest. Sometimes it wins, sometimes it loses. However, there are a few reasons that make it hard to analyze the data when it comes to Goths in tournaments. Number one, it's usually the underdog who plays it. Usually it's going to be the underdog who feels like he needs to do something crazy, something a little bit out of pocket, something a little bit unique, and so the Goths pick is usually an attribute of an underdog drafting strategy. Or it's going to be the last pick Goths versus one of the first pick meta civilizations, to where the Goths are at an inherent disadvantage. The Goths are going to be playing a risky and unconventional style in hopes to catch the meta first pick civ off guard and snatch a win. This is not a consistent strategy, and this is not a strategy that is necessarily going to have a high win rate. However, even winning 2 out of 5 games with a Goth last pick versus a first pick civ is is a huge victory in terms of the draft, and it's definitely a decent ratio or percentage to have when considering the strategy you want to implement. So without looking too deep into the numbers, we can say that it's had some mixed success in tournaments, but overall it's performed well enough for players to continue going for it. Even today, players are going for that last pick Goths, and it's performing decently well for them. Because of this, some people even choose to ban it just to not even have to think about it in the draft and not worry about it. And for example, this is what I do in a lot of tournaments. Ban out the Goths to not even have to consider where my opponent can play them or what cheesy strategies they've been building up. What I love about Age of Empires is how there are certain civilizations that do really well in many scenarios, and there are other civilizations like the Goths who have their specialties but also have their clear weaknesses. However, the Goths in general are very unique in the sense that they see a ton of tournament play in this last pick and almost no tournament play in first or second pick, which is really insane, and I think it's the only civilization like this. I could be wrong, however, so if you guys have been following and know of another civilization that is very similar in its patterns for pro play, definitely let me know in the comments if there's another civilization that is exactly like the Goths, in the sense that it's picked very often in the last slots and almost never in the first or second. Hope you guys enjoyed this video about the Goths and tournament play. I know a lot of you guys loved the Goths growing up. As you know, kids, we used to always love the husk roll and spamming infantry to 210 population. Some people even today still love doing that, and I can't blame you, because it's a lot of fun when you get to spam the infantry. But it's nice to see that the Goths are still performing pretty well despite their inherent weaknesses being an infantry civilization. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you guys want to support me further, check out my Twitch and my Patreon, links below. Patreon for guides and Twitch for live streaming. I'd love to see you guys all there. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.